The sky over the town square was the color of cold iron. It was a Tuesday in the year 1721, and the cobblestones of the little French market town were slick with the dampness of an overnight rain. Merchants had not set up their stalls. The usual smell of bread, apples, and cheese had been replaced by something heavier in the air: anticipation, dread, and the faint metallic scent of the gallows timbers, newly oiled for the occasion. The woman at the center of it all sat in a dark cell beneath the courthouse. Her name was Marguerite Lavoisier, though in the taverns and gossiping alleyways, they simply called her the murderess. To the authorities, she was a criminal condemned for killing her husband in cold blood. To others, especially the women of the poorer quarters, she was a hero of defiance, a figure who had dared to stand up to the man who had made her life a daily torment. For weeks, the trial had gripped the town. It was not simply the crime that fascinated people, but Marguerite herself. She did not plead for mercy. She did not cry or collapse when the sentence was read. She stood there in the dock, staring at the magistrate as if she were the one passing judgment. And now her final day had arrived. The prison beneath the courthouse was a place of rot and shadows. The air was so damp that moss grew on the stone walls, and the only light came from a slit high above the door. Marguerite's chains clinked softly as she shifted, her ankles bound, her wrists shackled loosely in front of her. She had eaten little that morning, only a crust of bread and a cup of thin broth. She knew she needed her strength, but the heaviness in her stomach wasn't hunger. It was resolve. She would not die quietly. Outside, the executioner was making his preparations. His name was Etienne Leroux, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with hands like carpenter's mallets. He was no stranger to the work. Over 3 decades, he had carried out more than 200 executions. He prided himself on efficiency. One clean stroke, one quick drop, one decisive swing of the blade. That was his creed. But something about today unsettled him. Perhaps it was the whispers he had overheard in the tavern the night before that Marguerite was too clever to hang, that she would find a way to cheat death. Etienne didn't believe in curses or omens, but as he ran a whetstone along the edge of his axe, a strange unease sat in his chest. The gallows had been erected at the center of the square, its frame tall and black against the morning mist. A thick rope dangled from the beam, its loop swinging slowly in the breeze like a lazy pendulum. Beneath it, a simple wooden platform awaited. By mid-morning, the square began to fill. Men came in from the countryside, their boots muddy from the fields. Women arrived with baskets on their hips, some whispering prayers, others muttering curses. Children clung to their mothers' skirts, both fascinated and afraid. It was a public holiday of a grim sort. No work was being done. The tavern owners had brought out barrels of ale to sell to the crowd, and a group of pickpockets moved like shadows among the onlookers. At the front of the crowd, a small group of women, faces hard and eyes sharp, stood silently, their arms crossed. These were Marguerite's supporters. They had known her life, her beatings, the nights she had gone hungry so her husband could drink away their coin. They didn't say it aloud, but in their hearts. They hoped she would not give the authorities the clean, orderly execution they wanted. In her cell, Marguerite could hear the noise outside, the murmur of hundreds of voices, the creak of carts, the occasional burst of laughter. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly. The scent of rain was still in the air, and somewhere in the square, a bell rang twice. The door to her cell opened with a screech of iron hinges. A guard stepped in, followed by the town priest. "It is time," the guard said simply. Marguerite stood. She did not ask for a final prayer. She did not weep. She only adjusted the thin shawl over her shoulders and stepped forward, her chains dragging softly over the stone floor. They led her up the narrow stairway from the cells into the open air. The sudden brightness made her squint. The chill wind caught her hair, and for a moment, she felt almost alive again, alive in a way she hadn't in years. The crowd saw her before she saw them. A ripple of murmurs passed through the square. Some called her a monster, others a martyr. She kept her gaze forward, her chin high. Etienne Leroux stood waiting at the base of the gallows, his axe resting against a post. Beside him, the magistrate read aloud her crimes for all to hear. Poisoning, her husband's stew with foxglove, hiding the body in the cellar for 3 days, then attempting to sell his watch and boots in the market. Marguerite did not deny any of it. She simply stared at the rope above her head. When the magistrate finished, the executioner stepped forward. "Kneel," he said quietly. She did not move. The crowd shifted uneasily. The rope swayed. Somewhere in the back, a child began to cry. Etienne tried again, his voice harder this time. "Kneel, woman." Marguerite's eyes met his. "You'll have to make me." It was the first time she had spoken all morning, and her voice carried across the square like a stone thrown into still water. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Etienne hesitated. He was used to fear, to pleading, to desperate compliance. But defiance, this kind of defiance, was dangerous. It had a way of spreading. 2 guards stepped forward to force her down, but she twisted, pulling against her chains. The crowd roared, not in anger, but in shock and excitement. And so began the first signs that this would not be a normal execution. From that moment, the tension thickened like smoke. Every movement, every glance between the prisoner and the executioner was electric with hostility. Etienne tried to keep control, but Marguerite had seized the moment. When they finally forced her onto her knees, she did not bow her head. Instead, she turned it slightly, looking out over the sea of faces watching her. She smiled. The smile was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. Enough to make people whisper. Enough to make the executioner feel the first crack in his authority. That afternoon, the air grew colder. The mist began to lift, revealing a pale, washed-out sun. The execution was delayed briefly as the magistrates argued about procedure, whether she should be allowed to speak, whether the axe or the rope should be used first. Marguerite stood there in chains, waiting, and though her wrists ached and her knees were numb from the cold ground, she felt something dangerous bubbling up inside her. Plan. And that plan, before the day was out, would turn the square into chaos. The crowd had been waiting for hours. The damp chill of the morning had given way to a raw, restless energy. The sun hung pale and thin in the sky, casting long shadows across the gallows. Vendors were calling out the price of hot cider and roasted chestnuts. Children darted between legs, and men jostled for a better view. But all eyes, every single one, kept flicking back to the platform where Marguerite Lavoisier stood. Her shawl had slipped from one shoulder, but she made no move to fix it. Her chains had left faint red marks on her wrists. She stood tall, her gaze fixed not on the executioner, but somewhere beyond him, past the gallows, past the rooftops to some point in the far distance. It was as though the entire crowd was nothing more than a backdrop to her final act. Etienne Leroux, the executioner, was beginning to sweat despite the chill. He'd executed thieves, soldiers, heretics, and even nobles. He'd faced curses, fainting, sudden madness, but never this steady, unnerving calm. Marguerite didn't tremble. She didn't look at the rope with dread. She didn't plead. She was waiting, and he could not guess what for. The magistrate's voice rang out again, harsh and formal. "Marguerite Lavoisier, you have been found guilty of the murder of your lawful husband, Jacques Lavoisier. The court has decreed you shall suffer death by hanging until dead. May God have mercy on your soul." The crowd stirred. People leaned forward. Somewhere near the front, a woman murmured, "Hold your head high, Marguerite." Etienne signaled to the guards. 2 stepped forward, seizing her by the arms. She resisted, not with wild thrashing, but with a sudden rigid stillness, her feet refusing to move. The guards dragged her toward the center of the platform, but she twisted sharply at the last second, pulling them off balance. The crowd gasped as one of the guards stumbled and nearly fell from the stage. Etienne's jaw tightened. This was not going to be clean. Finally, she was positioned beneath the beam. The rope swung above her, the noose ready. Etienne reached for it. Marguerite tilted her head back and looked directly at the loop of rope. "You think this will stop me?" she said, her voice carrying over the square. It wasn't shouted, it didn't need to be. It was clear, steady, and deliberate. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Several people near the back began pushing forward, trying to hear better. Etienne ignored her, lowering the noose and looping it around her neck. He tightened it, his thick fingers rough against her skin. She did not flinch. The platform creaked as the trapdoor's lever was set. Etienne gave a final tug on the rope, stepped back, and glanced toward the magistrates for the signal. The magistrate nodded. The lever was pulled. For a heartbeat, everything was as it should be. The trapdoor dropped. The rope snapped taut, but then came the sound. Not the clean final silence of a hanging, but a sharp crack followed by a slackening. Gasps erupted from the crowd. The rope had broken. Marguerite fell, striking the ground with a heavy thud. For a moment, the square was frozen in disbelief. Etienne stared down from the platform, his face pale. This had never happened to him before. And then she moved. Marguerite rolled onto her side, coughing, her hands scrabbling at the dirt. The broken length of rope dangled from her neck like a mockery of the executioner's craft. A murmur swelled into shouts. Some people cheered, others cursed. The guards scrambled down from the platform to grab her, but she was already on her feet. In the confusion, Marguerite made her move. She ran, not toward the alleys behind the square. Those were blocked by soldiers, but straight. Through the crowd itself, the people parted in shock, some reaching for her, others stepping aside. The chains on her ankles slowed her, but her determination made her fast enough to gain several meters before the guards recovered from their surprise. Etienne cursed, leaping from the gallows after her. His boots hit the cobblestones hard, and he began to push through the crowd, his massive shoulders shoving people aside. Marguerite dodged between two merchants, knocking over a crate of apples that rolled across the square. A group of children screamed and scattered. The guards were shouting now, the crowd surging like a tide in every direction. Somewhere, someone began laughing. The sound spread, nervous, incredulous laughter at the sight of a condemned woman outrunning her. Executioner in broad daylight. Etienne's heart pounded. Every second she stayed free was a humiliation he could not afford. He could feel the magistrate's eyes on his back. He could feel the crowd's growing thrill at the chase. Marguerite reached the far side of the square, where a narrow street branched off toward the church. She darted into it, her chains clanking with every step. Her lungs burned, but she pushed harder, weaving between startled townsfolk who had no idea what was happening until she was already past them. Behind her, the sound of heavy boots grew closer. Etienne was gaining ground. His long strides ate the distance between them, but the chains on her ankles forced her to keep her movements short and quick. The street curved, revealing the high stone wall of the churchyard. She turned sharply, aiming for the open gate, and found herself blocked by a soldier. He moved to grab her, but she ducked under his arm, slipping past before he could react. The move cost her a second, and in that second, Etienne was nearly upon her. His hand brushed her shoulder. She twisted away, stumbling but not falling.